What's up, everybody? I'm Chris Dailey, founder of the Sports Court, joined here by none other than a Swiss Army knife, none other than Mr. Captain Comeback himself, Joey Harrington. Joey, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. And yourself?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be talking to you right now. So, you come from a football family. Your father played quarterback at Oregon, and he was a former coach at Oregon. Jokingly sent your father a letter of intent when you were born. So, growing up, what did your father teach you about football? And eventually, when you did get that offer from Oregon, how quickly did you jump on that opportunity?
You know, it's funny. Your first question, what did my dad teach me? So my dad was, not only did he play at Oregon, he was the first, and you know, it's funny, he never really shared this, but he started the very first game at quarterback at Autzen Stadium. And I never knew that until I was playing. But he had a football, background. He was a high school coach, but he was our Pop Warner coach as well. And I think one of the things that my dad taught me was what it meant to be part of a team. I remember taking you're in sixth grade and you take a shot in the gut and you feel like, you lose, the wind gets knocked out of you and you feel like you're never going to walk again. And, I went off to the side, arm around me and said, all right, how you feeling? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, if you're really hurt, we'll take you in and see the doctor afterwards. But if it's something you think that you can shake off, your team needs you in there. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And so, you strap it back up and you go back in and you start playing for your team. And that was really something that kind of stuck with me. And I think it's something that's really unique about football. There are plenty of team sports out there. And this is what I tell people a lot is what exists in a football locker room and what exists on a football field is so different than in any other sport. Because in no other sport, no other team sport, I should say, are you truly you are going to take a helmet to the kidneys and have to get back up and walk into that huddle again and say, all right, I'm ready to go because I have 10 other guys who are depending on me, right? That doesn't exist in basketball and baseball. It exists in things like MMA or boxing, but those are individual sports, right? Football is this unique combination of giving to your team and having to do it in a way that it's truly selfless, and comes at the sacrifice of yourself at times. When Coach Kaz sent that letter to Dad, it was more of just kind of a congratulations. Hey, congratulations on the birth of your first son, and I'm sure there's going to be some good film of him, and we'll be able to offer him a scholarship. When I did get that actual scholarship offer from Coach Bellotti, it was great and it was exciting. But I think one of the things that my dad, what I really appreciate is he didn't force me to be like him. He didn't force me down the Oregon football path. And I honestly had a hard time because I had an offer from Stanford, and I had an offer from Oregon. And again, my dad shared a piece of advice that I think was really helpful. And he said, look, if you're planning on living and working and raising a family in California or New York or New Jersey, go to Stanford. Take that scholarship because that degree is going to mean a lot around the country. But if you plan, and obviously how much you really know as an 18-year-old, but if you plan on living and working and raising a family here in Oregon, the people that you meet and the experiences that you have are going to open more doors than any piece of paper from another school. And that was ultimately what made my decision is being around the people that had truly helped me get to where I was at that point and knowing that this was a place that I was going to be long term. So that's one of the reasons why I ended up going to Oregon.
Yeah, definitely. And you really transformed that Oregon football program into a powerhouse. It was growing up, I've always known Oregon. I've seen Marcus Mariota and all those guys, and that's how I really got into college football, watching him in the playoffs. And they've been a powerhouse of football, but researching about you, I never realized just how bad they were before Mr. Joey Football himself stepped in and saved the day. So in 2001, you led Oregon to the number 2 ranking in the country, and during this and your whole college career, as you mentioned before, you manifested many comebacks, including one against Texas in a bowl game. So what's your favorite comeback of all time, and what's your mindset like when you go down?
my favorite comeback of my career or of all time, like anybody?
Of your career. That's how I meant to say it.
Okay, because there's some good ones out there. Of my, honestly, probably the first one. And that would have been or I should say the first one at home, because we had one the week before on the road at Arizona. But Arizona State, at home my sophomore year. I wasn't the starter yet. And I'd come in relief the week before and had a good game. And we were struggling at home against Arizona State. And they put me in at halftime. And we came back and we were down, around 3 or 4. I'll never forget this. There were 57 seconds left, and we had to go 78 yards to win the game. And to this day, I remember the play. We were in right tom formation, so it was a 3-by-1 set. Left tom formation. 7:57 throwback. So I had a dig route coming in here. I had a post corner on the backside, and I half rolled to the left and flipped my hips back and found Marshawn Tucker in the front corner of the end zone. And I threw that ball, and I still, right now, I can picture what was happening in the stadium. And that place went crazy. He caught the ball with 4 seconds left and scored the winning touchdown. And I stood there on about the 30-yard line. And I kid you not, I just went like this. I kind of just did a little all around and just looked at Autzen Stadium. And there were 50,000 people that were just going crazy. And that was a picture that I took in my mind, knowing that was a really incredibly unique situation. That was kind of the start of it, right? That was what solidified for me that I can do this. I can play. I can make an impact. And it doesn't have to be down the road. It can be right now. And that's one that was really probably my favorite of all of them is that first one, because it kind of got the ball rolling.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you mentioned the stadiums, and you played in many different stadiums throughout your collegiate career. And besides playing at home, what's the toughest stadium to play away throughout your college career? Because the thing I love about college, too, is the student sections. I feel like in the NFL, you don't really get that as much, but in college, they're loud, they're rowdy, and it's almost like the soccer fans that are just yelling and screaming the whole time.
Yeah, there's no doubt on this one. If I can't choose Autzen, which was our home stadium, Camp Randall at Wisconsin. We played there my junior year, and it was crazy. I mean, that place was unlike anything I had seen before. When the student section started doing jump around at the beginning of the fourth quarter, I kid you not, the entire sideline turned, and we were watching the students as it was going on. Completely took our attention away from everything that was happening on the field. They stuffed stuffed clothes with, I'm assuming, newspaper and stuff, and they were crowd surfing these dummies up, from the bottom of the student section all the way up. And so you saw people crowd surfing like students, but then they'd bring them down, and then they took these dummies and they started sending them up, and then they pushed them out and over the top of the edge of the stadium, so it looked like students were getting tossed out of the stadium. They were crazy, and it was such a fun place to play. We ended up losing that game. I think it was 27-24. That was one of only 3 games we lost when I was playing at Autzen, or at Oregon. But that was still a pretty memorable game, and that was a fun place to play.
Yeah, that's amazing. I saw a clip actually this year of the opposing team. They were at Wisconsin. They were jumping around alongside the jump around because they were just having fun with it, and you kind of embrace the moment and not really let it get to you. So that was a really cool clip, and that's a scary environment. I'm a big Notre Dame fan. They played away at Wisconsin this year. You always got to be scared of that team just because of the atmosphere, no matter how good or how bad they are. You always know the atmosphere is going to bring it, and it could get into your head.
Yeah, and the thing is, they haven't really had many down years. That's been a program that's been really stable. And like you said, even when they aren't at the top, they're dangerous enough, and that crowd can get into it to really change the course of the game. So that was a fun place to play, somewhere that I will definitely remember for a long time.
Yeah, they produced J.J. Watt, Russell Wilson, so a lot of good talent coming out of there now. Jonathan Taylor ripping it up with the Colts. However, you had a very successful career at Oregon. As a senior, your nickname was Joey Heisman, and you even had a big billboard in Times Square. So I recently watched an episode of Eli Manning's new show, Eli's Places, where he talked about Heisman campaigns alongside Larry Fitzgerald. So what goes into campaigning for the Heisman Trophy, and how cool was that process of being nominated for the most prestigious trophy in all of college football?
Man, that was pretty crazy, I think is a good way to put it. So, like you mentioned a minute ago, Oregon really wasn't on the national map at all. People didn't really know much about Oregon. And so what the school did is they said, okay, we're going to make a splash, and we are going to truly put it in your face. And you're going to know who this Joey guy is. So they bought the side of a 10-story, I mean, it was actually a building that was kind of under construction, but 10 stories of this building, and they wrapped it with a Joey, they crossed out Harrington and put in Heisman. And that was kind of at the start of the season to get the people on the East Coast paying attention to this little school out west. And the way they kind of framed it, the people at Oregon, because we had put up little billboards, in town or up and down I-5, maybe a little bit in Portland, for other players in the past. And so they came to me, they said, hey, we want to put you on a billboard this year. I said, okay, cool. Thinking it would be like down the street from our dorms or something like that. And then they said, they came up to me like a couple days later, they said, hey, that billboard, we want to put it in New York. It's like, you want to put it in New York? Why? They're like, don't worry about it. We got it covered. This is going to be big. It's going to be a big promotion. I said, oh, okay. And then they came and they said, all right, we've got this spot. It's on the corner across from Madison Square Garden, and it's 10 stories tall. Are you good with that? And so a 21-year-old kid, it's like, sure. I mean, how cool would that be? So I actually went out and saw it, and it was one of the most surreal experiences to be walking down the streets in New York City. I was there with my dad, and we walked down and just kind of sat right on the wall at Madison Square Garden and just kind of stared at it, like both of us in disbelief. Like, how did we actually get to this point? The crazy thing is, had we gone 6-5, I mean, heck, had we even gone, 8-3 that year, I think people would have thought of that campaign and that billboard as a pretty colossal flop, right? But we didn't. We went 11-1, and I honestly don't believe I would have been in that room as a Heisman finalist without it. Because this is something, Chris, that you weren't even born when this term was around, but it was called East Coast bias, right? Now you can turn on any TV, turn on your phone, turn on any laptop, and watch any game around the country. When I was playing in college, there were only a handful of games that were actually going to be on TV, right? So you had really kind of one game from each region that would be the marquee game, and then you might have one or two others that made it on TV. But what would happen is those other games on the West Coast, they'd kick off at 7:30, a 10:30 kickoff on the East Coast. All the voters and all the people who paid attention on the East Coast had all gone to bed, right? So they never got to watch the smaller schools. Everybody knew about USC and about Washington, and that's all anybody knew about the Pac-10 then. So we were trying to fight that East Coast bias and have actually somebody pay attention to somebody other than USC. And so without that billboard, I don't think people truly would have been paying attention to what we were doing at Oregon. And it put a lot of eyeballs on us. And like I said, had we flopped, had we not played well, had I not played as well as I did that year, it could have been a pretty big disaster, but it wasn't. And I think, like you said, it helped me end up in that room as a Heisman finalist, which, I still look back and can't believe that was something that I experienced. It was really pretty special.
Yeah, and I mentioned Eli Manning, how he was talking about it. I'm pretty sure him and Larry Fitzgerald lost to a guy named Jason White from Oklahoma. And Not many people nowadays know about Jason White, but Eli Manning said if he campaigned a bit harder and he campaigned a bit more, maybe he could have beat out Jason, because Jason was campaigning all around town. Everywhere was spreading his name that he could be a Heisman winner, and it's definitely true. I mean, the Heisman Joey thing, that's forever iconic, and many Oregon fans still know that, and it's almost seen as the transitioning point from Oregon football, as you mentioned, it used to be looked down upon, not even looked at all, and now all of a sudden it's a national powerhouse producing many great talents. So after the Heisman, you entered the NFL draft and you were swooped up with the third overall pick by the Detroit Lions. You previously mentioned you were expecting to go anywhere from the 3rd to 15th overall pick. So besides the Lions, were there any other teams interested in you and might draft you?
Yeah, so it's a pretty crazy process before the draft, or it was then, where you'd fly around to all these different teams, and some would have you work out, and some would just sit down and talk with you. But you were bouncing from one corner of the country to another. I met with the Lions, I met with the Panthers, I met with the Bills, the Bengals, the Redskins, and the Chiefs. And those were really the teams that were kind of looking for quarterbacks early that year. Some took them, some didn't. And I have a lot of people ask, do you wish you would have gone somewhere else? Or do you think things would have worked out differently? Maybe they would have. But what people kind of forget is they're looking at Detroit as what they are now, right? They were only 2 years removed from Barry Sanders, right? Barry had just retired. They were a mediocre team, didn't have a whole lot of winning tradition, but they weren't the 20 years of misery that they've been for a while, and so it was an opportunity for me, right? That was a great opportunity to kind of jump in and try and build that winning tradition. The places that I ironically didn't want to go to were Cincinnati and Buffalo. The two places that I really did want to go were Kansas City and Washington. And Detroit was kind of like, all right, this could be a project. It's interesting how things turn out, right? And you'll find this as you continue to grow and have your own experiences, that even at the moment, or I should say, not everything is going to go well. Not everything in life is going to go the way that you plan it. And my time in Detroit definitely was not what I had planned. I got kicked in the teeth for 4 years, and I couldn't find a way to kind of dig myself out of it. But looking back on it, I wouldn't change anything for the world, because it taught me so much about myself. It taught me so much about being resilient. It taught me how to deal with people, how to look somebody in the eye and say, you know what, here's what I did well, and here's what I need to fix, and here's what I need to do to get better. And it taught me about owning my mistakes. And I mean, there are so many things that I can look back on in that time in Detroit and say, yeah, we were not a good football team, but in terms of life experience, I learned a lot, and it was really valuable.
Yeah, and Detroit, as you mentioned, for the past 20 years hasn't been the place that many prospects want to go. You see Matthew Stafford, you see Calvin Johnson, two amazing, amazing players. And Calvin Johnson, who I actually interviewed at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, unfortunately couldn't get out of it, and he just retired. And that's the way many talents end up. So you mentioned speaking to people, and one of those people was head coach Steve Mariucci, who changed to a whole new philosophy that was a very conservative one. So did this play style at all change and affect your confidence both on and off the field?
It's interesting. Coach Mariucci is a great guy. He's a great person. He's somebody that you can sit down with in a room and have a wonderful conversation. He's fun. He's engaging. But I don't necessarily think he was the right coach for the team that we had at that time. He was a great coach for the San Francisco 49ers team that he came from, right, with established veterans who knew how to win, right, who knew how to lead themselves. And Mariucci could be that guy to kind of bring everybody up. We had a lot of young talent that didn't know how to win, that didn't know how to practice, they didn't know how to prepare. Like that was one of the things that we were truly missing from that team is we were missing some discipline. And while coach was a lot of fun to play for, a lot of times what we needed on that team with a bunch of young talent was someone to grab you by the face mask and say, just shut up and get in line. Like, do your job. And that wasn't coach's strength. He had a lot of other strengths, but what we needed at that time didn't necessarily align with what he was best at. So it's one of those situations where being in the right place at the right time, or maybe the wrong place at the wrong time, affects the trajectory of where your career goes. But it's really up to you at the end to make it right and to say, what did I learn from this? And how can I take this experience and make myself better? And that's what everybody in the NFL is trying to do is take the experience that they have right now and figure out, how can I use this to get myself better and get ready for next year?
Yeah, and the NFL, as you mentioned, is all about fit. It's just one big puzzle, and you have to try to fit all the pieces together. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And eventually, you did get traded to the Miami Dolphins, where one of your best performances came against the Lions on Thanksgiving Day. So, firstly, what did that win mean to you? And secondly, can you describe the story about that day and what happened with Billy Joel?
It's a funny story. So, I did get traded to the Dolphins. A long story behind that trade, but I ended up playing for the Dolphins the next year. And, of course, wouldn't you know it, that the Dolphins were scheduled to go in and play the Lions on Thanksgiving. And when I was traded, at the end of my time in Detroit, things were not. Things weren't good. I wasn't very well liked when I was leaving Detroit. Plenty of people had plenty of opinions about what kind of player I was. And, hey, many of those opinions were pretty well justified at the time. But I'll tell you what, going back into Detroit, and on Thanksgiving, which is Detroit's day. I mean, that's their Super Bowl. That's the day every year that Detroit knows that they're going to be the focus of the country. And to go back in and win was pretty satisfying. It was. And especially since, Nick Saban was our coach at the time. And he wasn't a dummy. I mean, he knew that me coming back into Detroit, they were going to be all over me. And so what he did is he said, all right, we're going to introduce for starting lineups, it's going to be our defense. So defense, was introduced coming out of the tunnel. The whole team, runs out. And then on the big screen, they break into this video, which I kind of looked up, and it's just clip after clip of me getting sacked and just hammered and blindsided, like driven into the ground and throwing interceptions. And in the background, they have a clip of me playing the piano, and the song that they're using is Piano Man, because, I played piano. I still play the piano. I grew up playing, and I love to do it. But, there's a lot of people, let's say, had a problem with me, but didn't feel like playing the piano and being a quarterback were things that fit very well together. And so they used it as like an insult, and they called me Piano Man and that day, and showed all these clips of me just getting hammered. And we were kind of laughing about it on the sideline, and, Piano Man has the last laugh as we win. But so I got back to Miami that following week after the Thanksgiving game, and there's an envelope on my stool from somewhere in New York, and I opened it. I was like, I don't know anybody in New York. So I opened this thing up, and there's a letter that says, this, Dear Mr. Harrington, enclosed you will find a note from Billy Joel. Billy Joel? Why would he be writing me a letter? And sure enough, I pull out the stationery, William Joel, across the top. And, to paraphrase, it essentially said, hey, dear Joey, I watched the Thanksgiving game and saw that they used my song to introduce you in Detroit. I would be honored if you wanted to use that song as an entrance song for any time you come out in the future. I've moved to Miami, and would love to get together. Congratulations on the big win. P.S. Maybe Detroit should use my song "We Didn't Start the Fire" as their theme song. And I was like, that's really cool that he would reach out and say something like that. So, again, funny stories that kind of come about from things that, that may not you may not think would be the best thing at the time, but end up being all right.
That's amazing. I went to Billy Joel's, and we speak of the Guardian. We speak of Billy Joel today. I went to his 100th show at the Guardian, which was spectacular. I love Billy Joel, and it's
You're
funny.
a Billy Joel fan?
Yeah, I love it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
It must be like from your. Who introduced you to Billy Joel? I mean, crying out loud.
I don't. My family did. I listen to him all the time, and I listen to "We Didn't Start the Fire," as you mentioned. But then eventually, I don't listen to him as much anymore. But I used to just listen to him on repeat, and all of his songs. I'm trying to, Only Good Die Young, all those songs. I listen to him, and it was amazing going to that concert. And they hung up his banner; it's still up there. So I think he has more banners hung in the past 10 years than the Knicks do, which is pretty cool. And it was really cool to see that.
Very cool to hear you're a music buff as well.
Yeah. So, and you speak of Nick Saban, who is a very interesting figure, and I've seen people say about him, he could have been great in the NFL if he stuck with it, and if he stuck with the Dolphins. What do you think about your time with Nick Saban, and do you think those people are saying true things about him?
I respect the heck out of Nick. Because when I was leaving Detroit, I was at a time where I was really questioning myself as a player. And based on how my contract was set up, I had a little bit of say in where I would potentially be traded. And I sat down with Nick, and he was honest with me from the very beginning. He sat down, he looked me in the eye, he said, look, we traded a second-round pick for Dante Culpepper. We'd trade a fifth-round pick for you. I don't care what we're paying him. I don't care what we're paying you. Because of what we traded, we're going to give him the first reps. We're going to give you the second reps. But if he's better than you, then he's going to play. If you're better than him, you're going to play. Can you deal with that? And I looked at him and I said, absolutely. That is all I'm looking for, is an opportunity to be put on the field or taken off the field based on what I've earned. And, I think I played 13 games that year. And that was all I was looking for coming out of Detroit, and trying to just kind of reestablish my career after a bumpy start there in Detroit. Nick was a different style of coach. He is. And I don't know if his style would have worked in the NFL had he stuck with it. It may have. He's a tremendous football coach. But what Nick does so well is he controls every little detail, right? He is an absolute control freak. And I say that in a good way, because what it does is it holds people accountable. He sets the standard, and he says, this is what you're going to do, and this is how you win. And if you do these things, you will win. If you don't do these things, you will lose. He has been able to craft and really mold a lot of young players coming out of high school, because they're impressionable, right? It's a lot easier to take a 18, 19-year-old kid and say, look, I have the experience. I know how to do this. Do things my way, and you're going to win. Than it is to take a 30-year-old NFL veteran who's had plenty of other experience in his life and knows what works for him and the ways in which he's been successful. It's tougher to take that player and say to him, I know the best way to win. Because, you're going to get some pushback. And I think that's what happened a lot of times with Nick, is he had his way of how he wanted to do things in the NFL, and that didn't always mesh with the way that all his players wanted to be. And that's the difficult thing about the NFL, is you have to be extremely confident, but you also have to be flexible, because there's more than one way to be successful. There's more than one way to win. And those coaches who are generally the most successful are the ones who are able to take this basic idea and stick with it as a foundation, but also flex around it, right? And be flexible to work with their players. And, I wouldn't, I haven't talked with him specifically about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the reasons why he left, is he felt like his way of coaching would have been more successful in college football. And I think we've all seen that that's definitely the case.
Yeah, definitely. I just watched something about him and why he left, and it's really interesting too, because I've seen college coaches. Some of them, of course, do have success, but a lot of in college, it's yelling and screaming and being loud, and a lot of times that doesn't work in the NFL. And college coaching versus NFL coaching is really different. And when coaches come in, they act like they know it all because they won college championship. You see it like a guy like Urban Meyer right now in Jacksonville, and not saying that he's a bad coach. I mean, he doesn't have the best of talent around him. But it's still interesting, nevertheless, to see how these guys come into the NFL acting like they're all big dogs, and then all of a sudden losing games like they never lost before. So, anyways, just to wrap up here, you did a TED Talk, and I've always been amazed with TED Talks. I've always loved watching them, and you did it about perfectionism. So, for somebody who didn't watch a TED Talk, what was it about, and how did it feel just to get all of that off your chest?
Having the opportunity to give a TED Talk was pretty unique. I didn't know a whole lot about the TED conferences around the country, to be perfectly honest. And having that opportunity to share my story, my experiences was a pretty great honor. Like you said, the topic of my talk was called perception of perfection. And it's about the idea that, not unlike what's happening, on social media with places like Instagram and, about putting this picture forward that absolutely has to be perfect, that has to be, the perfect light, and, the nothing in life is perfect. Let's just say that. And so what happened in my career was, because I had so much success in college, and truly, I played in 30 games in college and we won 27. In the times that we lost games, it was almost kind of a fluke that I could justify as, well, the ball bounced the other way that day. When I got to the NFL, things were not perfect. And things were far from it. And what it did is it started to shake my confidence. It started to chip away at my belief that I was not only a good player, but a good person. And that is what I think is really difficult, or I should say is something that everybody can identify with. In the same way that if you're on Instagram and you're seeing all these people put up these photos of what beauty should be, or what success should be, or what you should be doing with your life, and you compare that with yourself, more often than not, you're going to say, I'm not doing that. My life doesn't look like that. When in reality, what's happening is there's, everybody is putting on these filters, and they're polishing up this absolute perfect image to put out to the world. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is flawless. And I think the sooner we are able to, as people, are able to accept that and embrace it, the better we're able to grow from it, right? If in my career, I felt like I had to be absolutely perfect. I had to be the perfect teammate, the perfect leader, the perfect quarterback. I had to be everything for everybody. And consequently, what it did is it started tearing down on myself. And at the end, I was a shell of the player that I was before, because I had torn myself down based on this idea that frankly wasn't true. Nobody's going to be a perfect player. Nobody's going to be a perfect anything. And when you can accept that and allow that to become part of who you are, the growth that will come from it, the success that will come from it, the learning, the life experience that you can apply will be exponentially better than if you were trying to just maintain and hold on to this idea of not messing up. Because when you try not to mess up, that's when you put this undue pressure on yourself, and more often than not, you fail. But when you embrace the idea that I'm just going to go and I'm going to jump in and I may screw up, but that mess up, that screw up is going to help me learn and grow, those are the times when you actually have the most success, because you've taken off the pressure. And you're just playing and you're having fun and you're growing and you're allowing everything to come in and you're giving everything out without the worry that you have to be a certain way for somebody else. And, it's something that I wish I would have learned early in my career. I think had I been able to accept that early in my career, I think I would have been able to turn things around and would have had a more successful, if you want to use that word, NFL career. But the irony is, anybody's NFL career, most careers last like 2.6 years. And even the longest careers are just a fraction of your lifetime. So in terms of being successful, I don't want to be successful in this small stretch of my life. I want to be successful in the whole thing. And so by having that big, giant failure right in the middle that was public and that everybody could see and was blasted on the newspapers and, on the big screen in Detroit and, everywhere I went, that's actually helped me grow. And it's an experience that has helped me become a better person. It's helped me become a better father. It's helped me become a better husband. And that's what's important, right? It's the 60 years of life after my retirement that I'm hoping to have the success in. And so, yeah, that TED Talk was, I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed it. I've had a lot of really positive feedbacks, teachers saying they've shared it with students who are struggling with self-confidence. And it was a pretty cathartic experience, one that I didn't expect to kind of sneak up on me in the way that it did.
Yeah, well, it was truly amazing, and it's nice to hear that you got all that feedback. You had a lot of views on it too, so a lot of people seem to like and enjoy it. And just, I said lastly to wrap up there, but I have to ask you, we spoke about the Piano Man. You played Piano Man, a cover of it with Jason Mraz. So how did that experience come about, and what was that like?
So, funny story. Okay. After my rookie year in the NFL, I was sitting on the beach with a buddy, and he said, "Hey, you should, listen to this new guy who's, going to be putting out a record here pretty soon. His name is Jason Mraz." And, oh, great. He's, I listened to it. I was like, wow, he's fantastic. We should do a charity concert with him. Why not? And at the time, I just started my foundation, the Harrington Family Foundation. So I said, let's do a fundraiser concert and see if Jason Mraz would come and play. Well, not only did Jason Mraz come and play, but John Popper and Chan Kinchler from Blues Traveler came and played as well. So we just kind of had this kind of impromptu concert in Portland where Jason got up and played the guitar and John and Chan came out and played all their hits. And kind of at the end, we were just sitting there saying, what should we do? What do we, what kind of encore do we want to do? And I was like, well, John plays the harmonica and Jason can sing. And I was playing the piano a little bit with him. And so I was like, what songs have all those? And I thought of Billy Joel and Piano Man and the harmonica. I was like, why don't we do Piano Man? So Jason sat up on the piano, and I started playing, the piano part, and John Popper started playing the harmonica part, and Mraz just started singing, and it was one of those moments that, again, I never, looking back on this 20 years later, it's like, how in the world did this come together? But it was unbelievably fun, and it's something that I'll be able to tell my grandkids about, like, yep, I did. Your grandpa played in a concert. Yeah, not just in the NFL, but I played in a concert downtown at Crystal Ballroom. So, man, I've had some really unbelievable experiences with my life, and football has given me so much. And I would be lying if I didn't say that I've enjoyed the ride. It's been a great trip so far.
That's amazing. And Joey, this has been one of the best interviews I've personally ever done. I love when I can get something out of the interviews and the people watching it could get something out and learn something from it. And I really thank you for, as you said, you're an open book. So sharing all your stories and not being afraid to tell it how it is. Because I have a lot of people, that don't answer the questions fully, and you can tell, but I really appreciate your honest and open responses, and just best of luck with everything in the future. I know you're up to many different things from the foundation, as you mentioned, and hopefully those Portland Thorns and the Timbers can win in the playoffs.
Yeah, Chris, and the same to you, man. Thank you for reaching out. It's truly been a pleasure. If there's anything I can do to help out, I would love to help connect you with anybody you want to interview. And, it's so fun to see people like you, frankly, just going for it. I'm really impressed to see what you got going here, and best of luck in all you have going forward.